Hello everyone, I'm back and I know it's been a while, so I apologize, but things have been very busy, but I'm back for a new series. And in this series, we're going to be looking at my complete workflow with a CineLog 30 V3 and how I use it for professional FPV fly-throughs. Now, I know some of you will have watched my day in the life videos, which I really appreciate, and I will be bringing those back very soon once I get some time. But in the meantime, we're going to take a look at my end-to-end process in short videos explaining each part of my process and how it works. And in this series, we'll be taking a look at the CineLog 30 V3 real-world performance and pros and cons and why I have this as my go-to drone for FPV fly-throughs. And then we'll be looking at the beta flight tuning and rates for my quads because that's been a question a lot of you have asked. We'll also be looking at the settings that I use for the DJI O4 Pro and how to get the best out of this camera. We'll then go into the stabilization workflow that I use in Gyroflow and all of my settings, as well as the editing and post-production process, including color grading. And then we'll look at planning and flying a real-world fly-through. And then as a bonus piece of content, we'll look how you can use AI to enhance your fly-throughs. And then for anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Jamie and I run a drone production company called Aerial Motion Films. And I've worked with the likes of Formula One, Amazon Prime, Netflix, just to name a few. Anyway, hopefully you'll find this video series really useful. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get into it. So as the first part of this video series, we're going to take a look at the CineLog 30 V3 and why I use it for all of my fly-throughs. Now, first of all, just a disclaimer, I am not sponsored by any way in GEPRC, or have I received this. I bought this with my own money and I use this professionally because I think this is a fantastic FPV drone for fly-throughs. So when I first started flying FPV, I knew there was going to be a niche for this, and live in England, the weather isn't always great, so I figured I needed something to make it so I didn't have or didn't get affected by the copious amounts of rain that we have in England. So naturally, I started looking at FPV drones. Now, I didn't start as an FPV drone pilot. I started off in normal drones and then moved to FPV drones a little later on, based on this kind of decision that A, the barrier to entry was a lot more difficult than just flying normal drones, but also it enabled me to fly inside when it was raining here. So I actually first started off with the iFlight Bumblebee V3, which is a pretty massive and bulky cinewhoop, which flew okay. It was just a bit big. I think it weighed like 700 or 800 grams, fully loaded with a battery. You had to stick a GoPro on top, and yeah, it wasn't great. So when I first started properly getting into FPV fly-throughs, I was using the Cinebot 30, which was great. I loved it. It carried quite a hefty payload. I think I was using a 1100 or 1300 mAh 6S battery. So it was an awesome quad. It was just a bit heavy, to be honest. That had the DJI O3. So I couldn't use that to film on. I had to attach a GoPro, so it was a pretty heavy quad. I think I used that for about a year and a half. So it was a great setup, but then we had the DJI O4 Air unit come out, which opened up a whole load of possibilities. I was also not really that happy with the GoPro performance in terms of low light, which is especially important when you're flying inside. Although I will say the GoPros had lots of additional settings, especially in GoPro Labs, where you could change a lot of settings that weren't kind of available on the regular GoPro firmware. But in the end, I'm now using almost exclusively the DJI O4 Pro, because it's just a better camera all around. The low light performance is fantastic. It's great being able to shoot through and see through the camera that I'm filming with, which just makes life that little bit easier. Anyway, this isn't going to be a complete review on the CineLog 30. It's been out for a while. You guys have seen me use it. Just going to be a quick rundown and really why I love this drone. So we'll look at a couple of specs to start off with. So this is paired with the DJI O4 Pro. I use that with the DJI Goggles 3. I've taken off the annoying face pad that came with this and just attached a foam one. I can't remember where I got it from, but super easy to find. I would certainly recommend that. And I also use this with the Radio Master Boxer Max with the lovely CNC gimbals, and of course that is Express LRS. Now there are a few different options you can buy the CineLog 30 V3 in. One which is just a plug and play, which just means you connect your DJI goggles with your DJI remote, which I don't have because I don't use it. And you can just, go fly away, bind your controller, bind your goggles, and you're good to go, more or less. Now, I actually use the Express ELRS version, and when I first started out flying FPV drones, I did just use the plug and play version I actually was using, I think it was the original Vista, and then I moved to the O3 Air unit. With the original Vista, I was using that big kind of, I think it was like the original Inspire remote, and it all just ran off the DJI system. Now, the biggest problem I found with that, and the reason I switched to Express ELRS, is because I would find if you were flying, especially in a building, you've obviously only got a very limited amount of range, which is now actually amazing on the O4 Pro. But what I was finding was, as soon as you got into a spot where your signal strength would drop, and you got, I don't know, around to 5 or 3 megabits per second, if the video feed was starting to drop, I would actually find that the actual quad was fail-safing because it's all run on the same system. So I eventually decided to switch to Express ELRS. And what this now enables me to do is, yes, I still get the same issues with video dropouts or getting really low signal in buildings, but it now means I can fly through it without the drone fail-safing. So I might get in a lot of situations where the video feed almost cuts out, but because Express ELRS is so much better in terms of control feed and its signal, I can fly through those weak spots, which is great. And I think that's, for anyone doing this professionally, that's exactly what you want. The last thing you want is it fail-safing in the middle of a situation or somewhere which could be deemed to be dangerous. So the best thing to do is, and you can buy these with Express ELRS fitted, so I would just go ahead and do that. Bind your remote, which is really easy. I'm not going to go into that. Joshua Bardwell's got loads of videos on how to set up Express ELRS, etc., etc. So let's look at why I love this quad so much. Let's first start off with the flying. Now, as I mentioned, I did a lot of my fly-through career using the Cinebot 30, which was a pretty heavy quad. This is a much, much lighter package. Obviously, not having to carry a GoPro on it makes a big difference. The things I love about this is the way it flies. This thing is so stable, so steady. It just flies really nicely, especially in an indoor environment. Now, take it outside, it's a different story. Any light breeze and you're gonna have a bit of trouble flying this thing. The biggest thing you're gonna struggle with this outside is doing those kind of outdoor to indoor transitions. Trying to fly through a doorway, if you've got like a crosswind, can be quite difficult and you'll need to give it a few goes. This isn't designed for flying outside, but in a light breeze, you're probably gonna be all right. But anything stronger than, I don't know, 5 to 10 miles an hour, you're really going to struggle with this thing. When you get it inside, this thing flies great. I absolutely love it. When I got it, I found the throttle was quite sensitive in comparison to the much heavier Cinebot that I was flying. So I had to stick in a bit of throttle expo just to make it that I wasn't kind of bobbing up and down, because that's where I struggled when I was coming from a much heavier quad. But other than that, this thing flies beautifully. I didn't have to tune it in any sort of way. It came factory tuned out the box really nicely. I did, however, change the rates on this because I just found it a little bit too sensitive, especially for an FPV fly-through. As I said, we're going to go through the Betaflight rates that I use and why I use all those rates in the next video. So this is a 3-inch cinewhoop. You obviously got these 3-blade props which are protected by this prop guard, and this prop guard actually pulls off completely. So what I have found with this is quite easy to crack it. So I had to replace this frame quite a lot of times, but you literally, I think it's 6 screws, bolts on and off, so you can stick a brand new one on. And you can actually buy a full kind of repair kit for this with all the parts included in it, which is great. So really, really easy. I find this is really easy to work on. The props are really easy to take on and off because inevitably with fly-throughs, you're going to be bending props and all that sort of stuff. If you ain't crashing, you ain't pushing, as they say. But it's pretty sturdy. I've not totally trashed one of these yet, which is always a good thing. And generally, I think it's really well built. Now, there are some cons with this quad and a couple of things that have really annoyed me and were almost a deal breaker in the beginning. But once you get used to them, you can kind of work around them. I think we all know the DJI O4 Pro camera is a little bit sensitive to vibrations. So with the Cinebot 30, what they've done is they've actually mounted it on, I don't want to call it a gimbal, but it's like a floating plastic housing essentially. And what you've got is 4, and you're not going to see this on the camera, I'm not using a 2-camera setup, but you've got these little kind of rubber grommets that make this float, and you can see these sort of amount of flex that you've got in there on this camera. So this is great for getting rid of any vibrations that you might have from flying, especially if you're flying in windy situations or, turbulent indoor situations with air conditioning. So it's really good. It does a great job. But you do find if you have a bit of a hard landing or you bump into a wall, what's going to happen is you're going to find that this will flex, and what you'll have is the prop will then get stuck between the bottom of this plastic plate here and the camera. And what that does is it can cut through these little grommets or completely pop them out. Now it does come with a little tool so that you can push it through and then pull that grommet back in and reconnect it. However, it is an absolute pain in the butt, and sometimes I can do it within seconds and sometimes it can take 10 minutes, which isn't great, especially if you're in a high pressure situation. And I'll come on to how I deal with that in a moment. It is really annoying. I don't think it's the greatest design. I think they could have done it better. So maybe with the CineLog 30 V4, we might see an improvement on that, which we probably won't see that until the DJI O5 Pro unit comes out. It is annoying. It is workable though, but I would suggest with any drone that you're using professionally, you always have a spare of the exact drone that you're using. It means you haven't got to faff about with trying to get that little rubber grommet back in. You can just throw that one away, bring in a new one, and you're good to go. So you have them both set up in the exact same settings, and you can deal with that when you next stop flying. The second biggest thing about this quad that annoys me is these antennas. Now, the steely-eyed amongst you will have noticed that I am not using the stock antennas that came with the DJI O4 Pro. The original antennas that were fitted with had this weird kind of connection where the wire coming from the antenna to get to the air unit wasn't quite long enough when they designed and built this. So I don't want to say bodged two wires together to make it long enough, because it kind of was a bodge, and people were saying those were breaking quite easily. Now, I'd never had that problem, but if you were going to break it, it was going to be a pain in the ass to fix, essentially. Now, the other biggest problem with these, and I'll take this little clip off and I'll explain what this is in a moment. Now, again, flying indoors, you might have a situation where you bump into something. And what was happening with those stock antennas is they would quite easily fall out like this. And you'd end up with your antennas sort of flapping around. And guess what could happen? They get stuck in the prop and bang, your antennas are now being completely chopped off. So that happened to me a number of times, or it was happening where the wires was getting sliced, it was getting completely cut off. So I ended up having to completely replace the antennas. Now, the DJI O4 antennas didn't come with a long enough wire, as I mentioned. So what I actually decided to do was go with these original Cadex Vista antennas, which are just left-hand polarized, so you can use them, that's absolutely fine. And then they essentially just fit into these little brackets that they've got installed here on the CineLog 30, so that's absolutely fine. And the good thing is about these antennas is the wires, I think, were 15 centimeters long, or maybe it was the 8 centimeters that I got. I can't exactly remember. I'll double check and put it on the screen in the video. The nice thing about these though, the kind of housings that the wires are in are a lot thicker, so they fit a lot better into these little holders here. But the other solution I found when I was using the original DJI antennas was this little clip here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but I just 3D printed that. So it just clips onto the antennas here and just holds them in place and stops them from completely falling out. Now, it wasn't foolproof. Sometimes they still popped out. It just didn't happen quite as much. But now I'm using these with the thicker wire covers. I find that this happens a lot less. And also the propellers find it a lot more difficult to chop these ones up. So I would suggest when you get to it, not necessarily straight away, but just replace those antennas. It's easier. You can pick the antennas up from any major drone store, and they're very easy to fit. The only thing you'll have to find is the plastic housing where the wire is quite long, so you'll just need to get a Stanley knife or a scalpel knife and just cut those down. Just be careful not to cut those inner wires, but good solution. This is the way I'm using it now. So that is really my two biggest gripes with this quad. Other than that, it's absolutely fantastic. It's super stable. I absolutely love flying this, and I've got absolutely no intention of changing this anytime soon. The next thing I want to talk about are your battery options when it comes to the CineLog 30. Now I use a few different battery options depending on the flight time that I need and also how much it makes the quad weigh. So at the moment I'm using 3 different batteries of all different sizes. What I like to prioritize when I'm flying indoors is flight time. But if you are flying around people, you also need to take into account that the bigger the battery, the heavier it's going to be, which means the more potential kinetic energy it has if it hits into someone, God forbid. Now, the biggest battery I use for this is an 850 mAh 4S lithium high voltage battery made by GNB. This is a great battery, and with this I can get, and have done before, 9 to 10 minutes of flight time. However, this does put it over the 250 gram limit. But if you're flying indoors, I don't think that really matters. You just have to be cautious. If you're flying around people, it does make it that bit heavier. Now, one of the other batteries that I use is made by GNB again. Again, it's a lithium high voltage battery. It's just a 650 mAh, which brings it closer to that 250 gram weight. However, it's still slightly over at 257 grams. So again, something you just need to bear in mind. And with this, I tend to get between 6 and 7 minutes flight time. Now, the smallest battery I have is again another GNB lithium high voltage battery, which comes in at 660 mAh, but you can see it's considerably smaller than this 650 mAh battery that I was also using. And the reason I use this one is specifically this comes under 250 grams, 248 grams fully loaded, which is great, especially if you're flying outdoors. I know some of you guys in America, well, this will be a big thing for you. Us from the UK, you know, we still can't fly over crowds outdoors, but it just makes it that much safer. And I tend to use this battery when I'm flying around people and soft targets. Now, of course, there are a load of other battery options. I've always loved these GNB batteries. Again, not sponsored by them in any way, but GNB, if you would like to sponsor me, you know where I am. The other thing I want to talk about with batteries is, why am I using lithium high voltage batteries? Now, traditionally, I would have used a LiPo back in the day when I first started out, and those have a maximum voltage of 4.2 volts per cell. And with a lithium high voltage battery, you have a maximum of 4.3 volts per cell. So with these, you get a much longer flight time, which is great. So I find lithium high voltage batteries are now the way to go over standard LiPos. Like I said, there are other battery brands available. I've just found these ones to be really good, so I would recommend these to anyone. Just don't leave them lying around the house because they do look like sweets. The other very quick thing I wanted to talk about is safety with these drones. Now, of course, when we're flying around people, you absolutely want to use something with this ducted design. Now, does that make it 100% safe? No, it does not. So I think a lot of people kind of see these prop cars and just assume that it can't hurt anyone. In terms of kinetic energy, probably not. I've hit myself in the head with this a couple of times and it's not really hurt at all. Now, what I have found, and I have done this to myself, is these props can spin at a 30,000 RPM. And although they're quite small, they are still incredibly dangerous. I have taken a sizable amount of skin off of my knuckles with this before, and I was taking off stupidly on a tree branch and it kind of flew towards my hands and almost chopped the top of my finger off. So they are still fairly dangerous. So just bear that in mind, especially if you're flying around people. You don't ever want to hit a person. It's not a situation you want to be in. Although we take as many of the risks away as we possibly can with these prop cards, but still know this can cause a nasty cut. So another question I get asked a lot is, do I fly in angle mode or acro mode? Now, I do prefer to fly in acro mode. I just find it the easiest way to fly. I've got the most control, the best mode that works for me. Now, that's not to say, should you be flying in acro mode? Can I not fly in angle mode? No, you can. You can fly in angle mode if you want. It's absolutely fine. When I first started out doing fly-throughs a few years ago, I started off in angle mode. There's nothing, wrong with that. The only thing you're going to have is you're going to be fighting the auto level when flying. I will say though, if you're flying in really confined spaces, it does make it a lot easier. So don't be afraid of just switching into angle if you need to, or doing a whole fly through. It really doesn't matter. No one's going to judge you. At the end of the day, if you're getting a great shot for your client, they don't care what mode you flew it in. It really doesn't matter. I will say though, if you're just starting out, I would start in acro mode. It's going to make your life a lot easier. In the end, you'll want to switch into acro mode eventually, so you might as well just start in it and it'll make the learning curve a bit better in the end. Now, you do have some other options when it comes to cinewhoops for flying indoors. Like I said, I particularly like this one. Again, I'm not sponsored by GEPRC. GEPRC, if you're listening, I would love to be sponsored by you. But there are other options available. You've got the Flywoo Fly Lens 85, which is a tiny little thing. I know some guys who use that. Again, with the O4 Pro, you can't go wrong. You've got the likes of the Cinebot 25 and then some, other options. I'm not going to name them all, but there are some other great options available. I've just found this the best one for me, but have a look around and see what you think. Where's the best place to get one of these? Because you might struggle. A lot of places tend to be out of stock when it comes to this. I just get them straight off AliExpress. Yes, they take a little bit longer to come, but you're also going to pay slightly less as long as they don't get stopped at customs, because then you get charged VAT. I don't know if that's the same where you live, but certainly it's happened to me a couple of times. But you might have to wait 10 days or so for them to be delivered. But again, I just find AliExpress is quite reliable, especially when a lot of other places are out of stock. And then, like I mentioned earlier, probably just the final thing I'll say on this is if you are using this professionally, please, please, please have a backup. Exactly the same quad, just so if something goes wrong with this one or something breaks, you're not going to sat there repairing it in front of the client. We've all done it. It's not the best way to go. So I've got 2 of these ready to go with also a box of spares just in case I mess both of them up. The biggest thing you're going to find with this is these dropping out and potentially cutting these tenors off, in which case it won't be usable. So you'll need to have something spare and ready to go. As I mentioned, I'm going to go through all the settings for the O4 Pro in one of the next videos. So please stay tuned for that. And again, the remote I'm using is the Radio Master Boxer Max, which I really like. There are, again, other options available with ELRS. I particularly just like the weight of it, and also those CNC metal gimbals are amazing. And again, I do have a spare radio, which is just the Radio Master Boxer, the original one, just in case something goes wrong with this. I have been known to drop this face down on the gimbals, which isn't great, although I haven't broken them yet. But yeah, maybe I'll do a review on this at some point as well. I mean, most people know what the Radio Master Boxer is, so I might not go into that. So then, just to summarize, this is my go-to drone for FPV indoor fly-throughs. It's super reliable, it flies really nicely, it's super stable, and the footage that comes out of it is great. What it's not good for, it's not good for freestyle flying. Despite all those Avata adverts which showed the Avata being amazing for freestyle, it's not, neither is this, and this is really going to struggle in any kind of windy situation, so just something to bear in mind. So like I said, this is the first video in this video series, and in the next video we'll be going through beta flight, how I've got my OSD set up for the CineLog 30 V3, and also my rates, which I'm sure a lot of you will be interested to see. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.